Hello everyone, welcome back to another chess openings video. Now, I know I haven't posted in quite a while and I'm sorry for that. However, now starting today, I'll start posting regularly again. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to play against the Alapin Sicilian if you're black. Before we get further on into the video, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel if you're new. Other than that, please, let's just get right into it. So, in the Sicilian Alapin variation opens after the moves e4, pawn to c5, and pawn to c3. When they play pawn to c3, and you're playing the Sicilian as black, their main idea in this opening is to strike early in the center with two pawns. So when you recapture, then they will have two pawns in the center on e4 and d4. Now, there's many ways to go about this. Some of the most popular being just pushing the pawn to d5, or playing knight to f6, or even knight to c6. However, in this video, I'm going to be covering on how to play the move pawn to e6. Now, this may seem kind of weird, as you're just moving a pawn just like they did. However, after they play pawn to d4, you simply strike in the center with pawn to d5. Now you know the purpose of the move e6 is to prepare the move d5. Now, as you may notice, after the move pawn to e5, this position can actually transpose into what is known as the French defense advance variation. And this is actually a pretty good opening, with the main ideas being ideas such as queen to b6 and knight to c6 to put pressure on the d4 pawn. So, in this position, you will have the initiative of trying to pile on the d4 pawn. Also, for development, you probably want to look towards a knight to e6 and then knight to either f5 or g6. So that's what you do if they push their pawn and advance it to e5. You simply just play the advanced French by piling up on the d4 pawn. However, what if they don't play e5? What if they just take your pawn? Well, here there's two things that they could possibly do. Either they could take the other pawn as well, or they could continue on with their development with the moves such as knight to f3. In this case, you simply continue with your development as well. And after a move such as bishop to e3, you simply play pawn to c4, causing that bishop to move back. After this, after strong developing moves such as bishop to d6, controlling the long diagonal here, or the important diagonal rather, both sides simply castle, and after moves such as bishop to g5 and knight to d7, this will be a pretty smooth game after this for black, as black has the initiative of pushing on the queen side with moves such as b5, b4, and pawn to a5. Also, the queen can also support the push with queen to c7, or maybe even queen to b6 in the future. So that's what you do if they play knight to f6 or knight to f3 right away and they don't take your pawn on c5. However, a lot of the times, players will simply take the pawn on c5. And in this position, it is actually black who is slightly better, as black gets the early lead in development with bishop to c5. And after moves such as knight to f3 and knight to f6, as you can see, black already has two pieces developed and has a pawn in the center, whereas white only has one piece developed and has a weak-looking pawn on c3. Now, you may be thinking that, well, black has an isolated pawn, and isn't that bad? Sure, isolated pawns could be bad. However, in this position, we need to take into account that the isolated pawn is the only pawn in the center, and how powerful it is when it controls the central squares. From here, white can try many things, such as bishop to b5 check, or simply continue to develop with bishop to d3. But one thing that white simply cannot do, and this has actually happened to me in many of my games, is that they play bishop to g5. And in this case, there's actually a tactic that happens right now. Black can take advantage of their early development and win a pawn, and probably the game after that. The tactic is bishop takes f2 check. And after king takes f2, you simply do knight to e4 check. Notice that the queen now attacks the bishop as well as the knight. And after the king moves, let's say king to g1, simply knight takes g5, and after knight takes g5 and queen takes g5, black is not only up a pawn, but has the central pawn, and also black's king is weak on g1. Along with this, black is simply threatening checkmate with queen to e3. And after a move such as castle, Black will have an easy attacking game after this. Okay, so let's say they don't play bishop to g5. Well, if they don't play bishop to g5, that's alright. The game simply continues. Bishop to d3, knight to c6, just developing the knight. Both sides castle. And after a move such as knight to d2, just continuing the development. Both sides have good chances in the game. However, as you can see, just like in the opening, black is actually slightly better here. Because, just like before, black has the strong central control with all of these pieces in the center, along with the d5 pawn. And also, it'll be slightly harder for white to develop with his bishop on c1, whereas black has open lines with both of his bishops. So that's pretty much how to play against the Sicilian Alapin. Now, I know there are a lot of other ways to play against the Alapin Sicilian, like I've mentioned before, with moves such as simply d5 first or moving any of the two knights out. However, this is just one way to play against the Alapin, and if you want, I can actually show other ways to play against the Alapin Sicilian and just leave which way you'd like to know next, if at all. Other than that, I honestly think that this is the best way to play against the Alapin Sicilian, as it gives black an easy game, and if they exchange in the center, then black could actually come out of the opening with a significant advantage. So, other than that, I really hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. Please consider smashing that like button and subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. And other than that, leave any comments or suggestions that you have in the comment section below, and I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. Thank you all for watching, and have a nice day.